Robert Fico otvorene podporil myšlienku vojenskej neutrality. Rakúsko má tento status už 70 rokov. Ako im funguje a mohlo by to fungovať aj Slovensku? To je téma môjho dnešného rozhovoru s rakúskym publicistom Robertom Misikom. Organizuje ho SFPA v spolupráci s Friedrich Ebert Stiftung a denníkom SME. Ďalej už budeme hovoriť po anglicky. Moje meno je Eva Mihočková. So, welcome, Mr. Misik. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for the invitation.
In 2022, that means 3 years ago, you have written an article where you claim that the idea of Austrian neutrality is already outdated. We will talk about the reasons later, but first I would like to ask you, what is going in your head when you today hear the Prime Minister of Slovak Republic, which is a NATO member, Robert Fico, saying that neutrality would suit Slovakia? Do you agree?
No, I would not agree or disagree because I cannot really be involved in Slovak politics. And I'm not so much inside of Slovak politics that I can understand everything from the intentions, but I would assume the intention is to move away from the global political scene, moving to a position of balancing between East and West, and going, to put it simply, in a more Putinist direction. That would be my assumption. So I wouldn't support that if I would have been asked if I would support that.
Yeah, well, of course, we are talking, or I'm asking you this question in a theoretic way because I'm assuming that based on what you have written, that you believe that the neutrality of a small Central European country is already outdated. I guess that your opinion is that this is not the best model how to secure a national security. So why do you believe that the Austrian neutrality is outdated?
I'm not so sure if this interpretation is right, because I think you have the juridical part of neutrality and of international law. That's the one thing. The other thing is what kind of political identity of a country, of a civil, nearly a civil religion, the way a country sees itself is connected to that. And this is, I would say, outdated. In Austria, for sure, you cannot really compare Austria and Slovakia. First, because Austria's neutrality is now 70 years old. It's from 1955. And Austria has these 70 years on the one hand. On the other hand, during the Cold War era, it was absolutely clear that Austria was part of the Western world. Yeah? Being part of it was not a neutrality in ideological terms. Austria also was not part of the non-aligned movement. It was neutral. So. And I think the circumstances, the Austrian neutrality and neutral mentality worked in 50 years ago. The circumstances totally changed. Austria is also now part of the European Union. So if you have a neutrality in international juridical terms, it makes sense to have a special neutrality policy, an independent foreign policy between conflict partners. But if you are part of the European Union and also part of the common foreign policy of the European Union, which isn't, as we know, very bold then it doesn't make too much sense to have a special Austrian neutrality policy, which is less bold either. So if you start thinking about that, it makes you come to a lot of difficulties.
When Robert Fico is talking about this idea of being neutral, he argues that Slovakia might somehow spend less money on its defense. He claims something in a way that neutrality, military neutrality, might be a cheaper way how to guarantee your national security. Is it true?
It depends from it depends on which country you're talking about. For Austria, for sure, it's true. I mean, Austrian neutrality is a very cheap thing. And you can also call it a free rider thing, because we are secure. For sure, we are secure, especially from, for example, Russian expansionism, because there are NATO countries all around Austria. So we have, in fact, then NATO security guarantee without being part of NATO, without having to spend too much on our armed forces and our defense. So it's a very cheap thing. And I'm not so sure if that would be the same case with Slovakia.
Exactly.
Imagine Russia winning the war in the Ukraine and to invade whole of the Ukraine, then Slovakia would border directly to the Russian sphere. So that's quite a little bit the difference between Austria.
Yeah. So geography plays an important role when evaluating the possibility of neutrality, because Austria and Switzerland are both landlocked countries surrounded by NATO countries.
Yeah.
So Slovakia, with its border on the Ukraine, cannot think about neutrality in the same way as Austria or Switzerland. Am I right?
Yes, sure. I mean, I don't know how great the difference is, and what it might change during the time. But one thing we can say, it's not the same. It's not the same like with Austria, which is surrounded by NATO countries, which isn't the case for Slovakia.
But I guess that even this level of defense spending, which is currently not that high in Austria, as you said it, might change soon, isn't it right? Because the defense minister has just announced that the defense spending will be raised in Austria.
Yes, the defense spending will be raised in Austria from nearly zero. It's not zero, but I think for sure we have an Austrian army, and most of the Austrian army costs, personnel costs. I think in terms of machinery, tanks or airplanes, Austria has no. Has no army which can have a role in a war or something like that. Yeah. So what Austria can do, and then you start thinking about neutrality, is raising the defense spending on the one hand, and on the other hand, to specialize on some elements of defense. And then you have to specialize on the one hand and be integrated in a European system on the other hand. Because when you're specialized on some things, you need the support on other things by others, which is in a way effective, but it starts becoming a problem with the idea of neutrality if you do it that way. And Austria is doing that, let's say, since 20 years to balance these two different approaches. First, neutrality, and the other hand, the European integration. And if you are integrated in the European defense system in which way or ever, then you have at the same time the problem that most of the European countries are part of NATO. So you are in a way integrated in the NATO security networks anyway. So it's a kind of lying to yourself to say you are neutral in a military way, and it's a kind of lying to yourself if you say you have an independent, neutral foreign policy, because we don't have it.
Mm. So basically, what I can see, what the picture is ahead of us, is that each country is a unique, and you can't really compare individual countries, Slovakia, Switzerland, Austria, because each of them has a little bit different circumstances for its national security. And there is one more specialty about Austria and other countries that are neutral, and that is the consent and guarantee by the superpowers. And that leads me to a question: how does a country can become neutral? Because to many people, it seems like a beautiful idea that we will all live in peace. We would like to be friends with everybody, and that it is enough just to say that we are neutral, so hands off. So can a country become neutral just by self-proclamation without any superpowers having to say that they agree with it and that they will provide their guarantees to their neutrality?
I'm not a professional in international law for sure, but I would say first it helps. It helps if you have neutrality which is guaranteed in some way by the great powers that might violate your neutrality or your independence. So in Austria it was clear. It was clear in 1955. It was a treaty by the four winning powers of the four winning powers of the Second World War, but especially Russia and the US, and especially Russia because there was this before this treaty and Austrian neutrality. It wasn't so clear if Austria wouldn't have the same fate like Germany, that the eastern part is part of Russian occupation and the western part is in a way administered by the three Western powers. So in that's the history of Austrian neutrality. It was very strong, connected by a guarantee of the superpowers. If we want to go to details, we can also. It was also a kind of zeitgeist. Stalin died. Khrushchev wanted to send a signal, so the signal was Austria.
Yeah, so you were lucky in time in that time.
Yeah, Austrians sometimes are very lucky and on the lucky side of history, and in that case we were especially. So it helps if you have an international guarantee. It helps also if you have a long tradition of neutrality, which is might it be respected by treaties or not by treaties, which is traditionally accepted. Let's see it in Switzerland. I don't think that declaring yourself neutral will impress an superpower which might have an interest in invading a country, will impress them too much. So that would be my answer to that.
Yeah, maybe I was a little bit leading to the history, which shows us that just saying that you are neutral is not automatically a guarantee that nobody will dare to attack you, because we have seen in the history the case of Belgium, for example, during the Second World War, or even more recently, even Ukraine had a guarantee from the Russia that it will not attack it, that it will be a safe country, and we can see that it evaporated basically. So that's where
Yeah.
I was leading, whether it is that easy just to say that we are neutral, because this is the way that populist politicians are trying to persuade the public, that it's so easy just to say we are neutral, hands off.
Yeah.
But it doesn't
Yeah.
work that
Yeah.
way.
This would, but I mean, it's very difficult to compare and to have all the history in the brain, but I think most countries who would say we are neutral without a strong historical, also in the international uh, consciousness, a historical groundness of this neutrality, I think they have no. It doesn't have to say you are neutral. Yeah.
So taking into account what you have just said, and also the fact that the European security architecture, as we used to know it, is basically gone, which is also evidenced by the fact that Finland and Sweden have joined NATO. Who can feel secure in Europe today? What is the best way how to guarantee and build a national security today in this very turbulent and unstable geopolitical situation?
It depends a little bit how you consider the international situation, and we don't know totally. Yeah, if we say we have imperial autocratic Russia, which is now in a conflict with Ukraine and tries to get back some kind of or some parts of the regions which were traditionally Soviet Russian territory and before also Tsaristic territory, then we have to assume that that Russia is not really a danger for Central and Eastern, Central Europe and Western Europe. If we would assume that Putin's Russia, with its Eurasian ideology, is very is very imperialistic, then we have to take care to deter them. Then the best way is to deter them by military power. So that's, but we don't know, because we don't know we don't know the future. So, but it also means if we don't know the future, it's better to prepare to any possibilities. So that's the first thing. So for sure, it's in a more conflict orientated world, and in a world where international juridical rules don't count too much. Military deterrence is a necessary fact. If we like it or don't like it, it doesn't matter. So first,
let me stop here. Can you achieve military deterrence, which is very effective way how to build your national security outside of a strong military alliance like NATO?
No, for sure nobody can. No small country at least can. So we have this, let's say, kind of difficult security architecture with the European Union, with the European defense facilities and all these things being integrated in a way in the NATO. And then we have national states which are stronger and greater and bigger or smaller. Germany on the one hand, Austria on the other hand. So for sure, for Germany, the things are a little bit different to Austria or for Poland. So that's the first thing, that for sure military deterrence is a central issue, and the central issue has to be organized in an integrated way within the European Union or NATO. The other thing is that small countries like Austria, with the tradition of neutrality, if they stop being neutral and joining NATO, for example, it would be very insignificant what they can add to NATO on the one hand, and on the other hand, if they would make a kind of independent foreign policy, open up doors for negotiation, open up doors for diplomacy, where strong superpowers don't have the possibility to, then a small country like Austria maybe could add more to security by staying neutral than by joining NATO. But this would, but the necessity would be that Austria makes an independent, also visionary in a way, foreign policy, but it doesn't do it in the last 40 years.
Yeah, and it all again depends on its geography and its tradition, as we have already described, because I'm always trying to make some comparison between Austria and Slovakia, and it's evident that Slovakia doesn't have the same luxury in geography and tradition as Austria does for the moment. And one more thing, there is that idea that is very alluring to a significant part of population, and that is the fiction of being some kind of a bridge between the East and the West. This is also somehow the essence of Robert Fico's policy, foreign policy, which is oriented on all four corners of the world, meaning that we are friends with everybody, and that means that nobody will attack us. Is this some kind of a clever strategy, how to stay secure, or is it just foolish and naive illusion?
It's naive. It's naive given the realities now. On the one hand, on the other hand, for sure it makes sense to have a foreign policy that is a bridge between East and West, but also a bridge between the global South, meaning Africa, meaning but also meaning Latin America. For sure this makes sense. For sure this makes sense, but it also makes sense for bigger nations like then Austria and Slovakia, and for nations that are part of NATO. I would say it makes sense, for example, for Germany too. Yeah, because we are now in a very, let's call it the unipolar moment after 1989 and 90. Changed to this multipolar situation, and now we have in a way a chaotic situation in terms of global foreign policy. So it would make sense to do more and more, for example, to be a bridge to Russia, not a bridge, but to have open lines of communication with Russia. For sure it would make sense. But it also would make sense to have a stronger coordination with Canada and Brazil in a situation of a very chaotic multipolar world, which also means that you cannot stick to traditional bonds between the countries, where you have to work every day on relationships, because it's very fluid and can change with every change of government. And so I would say it's very difficult for any nation in the world to do this in this way, independent of the question if they are neutral or not.
Yeah, but the question is whether if you try to be friend with everybody, if the consequence is that you're at the end not friend with anybody because you are not allied with anybody. You cannot be. Can you be friend with everybody? I mean, it's like in personal life. Isn't the reality the way that you have to really choose the side to be really protected when something bad happens?
Yeah, you're right. I'm always talking, thinking about in terms of history also. Although the history is gone, but Austrian neutrality during the Cold War was based on a lot of on many assumptions. The first was that you have the East-West divide, and Austria was totally clear on the side of the West, but with some privileged lines to the east. Let's put it that way. And with the active neutrality policy, like Bruno Kreisky did, but also together with other social democratic leaders, with like Willy Brandt and Olof Palme, they had some privileged relationship to the non-aligned countries. They had some privileged relationship to the to the uh, to the global south, to India, you know, all that. That they are friends with everybody, but it meant that they did something to make the world maybe a more peaceful and secure place. Yeah? So for sure, this would make sense if you can translate it to a contemporary way of foreign policy. But I don't see how it would be possible, and I don't see the politicians who make it possible.
Yeah. Well, we are still probably facing the dilemma of what is possible, what is feasible in this very complex and very ever-changing situation with the unknown outcome
Yeah.
today in Europe. So, Mr. Misik, thank you very much for this really interesting conversation, and maybe looking forward next time to see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Be welcome. Bye.